Good morning. Welcome to Equip, Build, Mature. Today, as I like to do on Saturdays, I want to do an overview of one of the books of the Bible. And today, we're in the book of Habakkuk. So, who wrote this document, Habakkuk? We know very little about Habakkuk. His name is only mentioned twice in this book of prophecy. And both times, he identified himself as the prophet Habakkuk. We see that in chapter 1, verse 1, and in chapter 3, verse 1. And that term seems to indicate that he was a trained prophet. It's very possible that Habakkuk was trained in the law of Moses in an institution for educating prophets. That practice, having an institution to educate prophets, that began after the days of Samuel. We read of this in 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 20, and 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 38. Habakkuk could also have been a priest involved with the worship of God at the temple in Jerusalem. Now, this assumption is based on the book's final psalm-like statement in chapter 3, verse 19, where it says, "For the choir director on stringed instruments." So what time in history did all this take place? Well, determining the date of the book of Habakkuk is easier than dating most books. He often spoke of the invasion by Babylon that was about to take place. We read of this in chapter 1, verse 6, chapter 2, verse 1, and chapter 3, verse 16. Now, this invasion by Babylon in 605 BC was a smaller invasion. This was not the total destruction of Jerusalem, Judah's capital, in 586 BC. Habakkuk's description of Judah indicates a very low time, morally speaking, in their history. If the date is around the time that Babylon invaded, then Habakkuk probably prophesied in the first 5 years of Jehoiakim's reign, which would be 609 to 598 BC. Now, Jehoiakim led Judah into great evil. From the Judeans' perspective, Habakkuk's prophecy was directed to a world that seemed to be right on the edge of a great disaster. Even when the northern kingdom was destroyed in 722 BC, God's people remained in Judah. But as another powerful foreign army marched for war, faithful people like Habakkuk, they wondered what God was doing. God had given this land to the Hebrews. Was he now going to take it away? They couldn't fathom that idea. In faith, Habakkuk prayed to God for the remaining Jews in Judah as they watched the destruction that was moving their way. This was a prayer of true faith and undying hope. So why is the document Habakkuk so important for us to learn and to study? Well, it's because Habakkuk, God's prophet, gives us one of the most remarkable texts in all of Scripture. It records a long conversation between Habakkuk and God. We see this in chapters 1 and 2. The prophet started the conversation because he was upset about what he thought was God's lack of action in the world in which he was living. He saw injustice prevailing. He wanted to see God do something more, specifically about justice against evildoers. So the book describes a very frustrated prophet, like Jonah had been a very frustrated prophet. Habakkuk expressed his frustration through prayers and eventually through praise to God. He did not try to run from God like Jonah had done. So what is the big idea of this document? Well, the prophet Habakkuk stood in Jerusalem and thought about the condition of the nation, his nation, Judah. He was astonished, absolutely speechless. So much evil prospered and increased. No one even tried to hide the evil that they were doing. Yet God remained strangely silent. So the question on many of their minds was, where's God? How long will he allow all of this chaos to continue? According to God, the evil would not continue much longer. We see this in chapter 2, verses 2 to 3. God would use another nation, Babylon, to carry out his justice. The evil people in Judah who thought that they would always get away with their evil actions, they would soon be punished. The book of Habakkuk describes a very arrogant people being humiliated, while the righteous lived by faith in God. We see this in chapter 2, verse 4. It reminds us that while God may seem silent and he may seem very uninvolved in our world, God always has a plan. He has a plan to deal with evil, and eventually he always brings about his justice. The example of the prophet Habakkuk encourages the faithful to just wait on God. As hard as it is, that's something we must learn to do, is to wait on God. It reminds the faithful to expect that God will work out all things for the good of our souls, as Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. So how does this document, Habakkuk, apply to you and me in the 21st century? Well, Habakkuk asked God the kind of questions perhaps many of us have thought about. Why do you force us to see injustice? God, why do you put up with wrongdoing? Destruction and violence confront us. Conflict is present, and we must endure so much strife. This is Habakkuk 1:3. We've all seen so much of the evidence of evil in our lives. We've all been touched, one way or another, by evil in ourselves and evil in other people. We carry the scars of evil at different stages of healing in our lives. We are surrounded by evil, and at times it seems as if we're trapped in a dark prison cell that we have made, and we are often simply broken by our bad choices and broken by living in a very fallen world. But Habakkuk, thankfully, reminds us that no place is too dark, no wall is too thick for God's mercy and grace to intervene and penetrate in a powerful and faith-building way. Guys, thanks for taking some time with me today. Hope you have a great day, and may God continue to bless us as we trust that he will intervene and he will penetrate into our hardship and give us the hope that only God can. You guys have a great day.